Okay, so welcome back to the skill tree / talent tree demo. This is part 2 of the 2-part series, or 2 parts for now. If there's anything that crops up that requires clarifying, I might do a part 3. But if you haven't seen the first episode, that's where we did the code for this skill tree system. And this episode is going to be all about making some UI using Unity's UI Toolkit to manipulate our skill tree. So this is the demo project here. This is the one that I made before doing the tutorial, just so I could show you guys what we're doing. And the UI consists of this main sort of window here. So you've got this panel on the left, which shows you your stats. So we've got strength, dex, int, etc. And we've just got something to show that our abilities are unlocked as well. Now, UI is very specific to your game. So this is very basic. It's just basic and slick. I just wanted to kind of keep it simple for this demo. And this video is going to be more about how to use UI Toolkit as opposed to how to create a great looking UI, because obviously this isn't that great, it's just very simple. But I just want to do it as a jumping off point for you guys to then go ahead and create something much better in UI Toolkit. But you can see, so we've got our stats page here on the left, then in the middle we've got the actual talent tree. So we've got our buttons here, which have got our skills. And then on the right hand side we have our skill description, which you can see brings in the thumbnail image, and then it's got the name of the skill, the description of the skill, the cost and any prereqs, and then a button which allows us to buy the skill so we can purchase it. And you can see this updates over here as well. As we purchase skills, this changes automatically and dynamically on the left. And it's actually quite simple. You can see in the project files here, we've just got these 2 UI documents. One is just the actual document for this main bit of UI, and then the other is the document for the actual skill tree button. And this is what we're going to reference to then spawn these in dynamically, these buttons here. So if this is your first time using UI Toolkit, I'm going to go along and try to explain everything as simply as I can. But it is actually quite a simple system to start working with. Once you figure out how to kind of use it, it's a bit different to Unity's built-in UI system. As you can see in the hierarchy here, there's no canvas. We've just got a UI manager, which has got our scripts on it, and a reference to something called a UI document. So yeah, but we'll explain this all. But yeah, I'll explain this all as we go along. So let's go over to our actual project here, and in our scripts folder, I'm going to right click, create folder, and we'll name this one UI. And then in this folder, I'm going to make the first of those 2 UI documents we saw in the demo. So I'm going to right click, create, I'm going to come down to UI Toolkit, and we're going to select UI document. And you can see that's going to generate some stuff that it needs, and then we can get to work here. So I'm going to name this UI skill tree. And while we're here, we may as well make the one for our button as well, just so we've done that. So we can say here UI skill, and then I'll say underscore button. And then we're going to open up our skill tree. So we just double click that. That opens this new UI Toolkit UI Builder window. And this is how we're going to put our UI together. Now, for a quick overview of the UI Builder, for those of you who this is the first time seeing it, in the middle here, this is our UI preview. So we can, make this a certain size, and then we can add like a visual element to this, which will fill this. and then we could add a label to the visual element, which is now down here, and a button as well. Actually, that didn't attach, so yeah, the label and the button are showing up in the order, and this is a child of our visual element. And you can have multiple visual elements in a document, so we could put another visual element in, which is now down here, and it's squished because of some of the settings in this flex drop down here. Some of the settings on this visual element are making this take up all of the room. They're not sharing the room equally. And we'll go through a lot of these settings while we're actually setting up our UI, and you'll see practically how this all changes. But that's our hierarchy here, and you've got your parent and child relationship like you would have in the hierarchy within Unity as well. Let's go ahead and delete these. And then you can see down here there are some already set up custom kind of UI elements that you can use. So we've got the label, the button, toggles, fold outs, sliders, progress bars, etc. They are all here. And if we go over to Project, Assets, Scripts, UI, you can see here we've got our skill button, which we've not built yet, but this is going to be kind of a element, such as just in the same way that a label and a button is an element, our skill tree button is going to be an element which we can drag up into our hierarchy. And again, we'll delete that. Now, it's not very useful that this is, just an arbitrary size. So what we can do is we can come up here. So with our canvas selected, we want to come over to the inspector, and under canvas size, we can choose match game view, and that will lock itself to the same resolution as our window is in our game view here. So we've got full HD 1920 by 1080. If we were to put this into Quad HD, this updates here as well. So we can see that our canvas size has updated. I'm going to put this back down to full HD though. And again, make sure match game view is selected here. So this is the window. So that's everything kind of in this window. So that's a very quick tour of the UI Builder window. There's only one thing we've not covered, which is style sheets up here, and I'm going to leave that for now until we actually have a style sheet, and I'll explain it then. But just know there is another panel over here that isn't the hierarchy. It's a separate thing to do with style sheets. Okay, so as in our demo project, you can see here we've got our main panel, we've got the skill system tree bit in the middle, and then we've got our description panel as well. So we need to replicate this in our new project. So if we go over to our new project, so we're going to have the stats on the left, we'll have the description on the right, and then the middle bit will be left over for our skill tree to spawn in. So we need 3 sections, so we're going to drag up 3 visual elements. And you can see they've stacked themselves vertically, but we want to stack them horizontally. So the way we're going to do that is we're actually going to drag in another element, and we're going to make these 3 here a child of this top one. So in this top visual element, I'm just going to rename this by pressing F2 to main panel, and I'm going to come over here to the inspector. And underneath flex, we have direction here, and you can see it's organizing its children in a column going down. What we want it to do is use it to do row going left to right. So we'll select this here, and this is that direction button. And now you can see that our panels are going left to right. If we did it top to bottom, sorry, bottom to top, if we went this way, you'd see that the top child is actually at the bottom of the tree. And if we did it row right to left, you can see that the top element's actually on the right. So we want it to go left to right. So we've got visual element 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to rename this. So we can call this stat panel. I'm going to rename the middle one to skill tree. And I'm going to rename the right-hand side one to be skill description. Now, with our main panel, I'm going to come down to background, and I'm going to go to our color, and I'm just going to drag up the alpha. And I don't want it completely black, so I'm just going to add a bit of white to this. And we can actually use a hex code here if we wanted, which I like 1F, 1F, 1F. It just gives like a not pure black look, it's just kind of nice like blacky, very dark grey look. And with our stat panel here and our skill description, I kind of want them to be styled similarly. So I'm going to go to our stat panel, and under background, I'm just going to up the color slightly for this one, and again increase the alpha. So let's start with our, we'll do 2F, 2F, 2F. So that's slightly lighter than this one. And we want this one to kind of match the styling of this. And this is a great use of style sheets. This is going to be a good use case for the style sheet. So if I choose our stat panel here, you can see here we've got flex, and then there's a white line next to shrink and grow, and there's a white line here on background for color. So this is anything that's been changed has this white line next to it. If I come up here to style sheet and style class list, I can type in a name here. So I can say stat panel, and I can extract all of our inlined styles to a new class. So anything with a white line next to it is an inline style. So I'm going to extract our inlined styles to a new class. And we don't actually have a style sheet in this project. So if we did, we could add it to the existing style sheet, but we don't actually have one. So we're going to add to a new USS. And I'm going to save that in our UI script UI folder, and I'll just call this skill style sheet. And you can see now this has got a stat panel class added to it. Our style sheet is referenced up here, and we have our stat panel class underneath this as well. And you can see that these styles aren't inlined anymore. They don't have the white lines next to them to indicate that there's been a change. If we wanted to now drag our stat panel class onto our skill description visual element, you can see that gets that same lighter grey background color. If we hover over the stat panel selector here, you can see in blue which elements have that class applied to them. If we select stat panel and then make a change over here in the inspector with this selected as opposed to the actual visual element, we can change the color and it will change anything else with that class. So as an example, we can have this be red, and I'm going to go back to the lighter gray. I just want to use this as a kind of as an example. If I then wanted to, in our skill description, still have this class but override something, so if I wanted it to have the same color but then maybe drop the alpha of our description panel, I can do that, and this color now becomes inlined. So anything that's inlined will override the class that's applied to it. Now because this is inlined on this color here, if I go back to the stat panel and change the color, notice how that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't match because I've overridden it. So that's just something to be aware of. If I go back to our skill description, and you can right click in inline styles, so for example on our background, and I can unset all, and that's going to unset all of the inline styles. It's going to get rid of them, and it's going to revert back to whatever the base class determines that it should look like. So we've gone back now to this pale color. So I said I'd go back to the kind of lighter gray, which was 2F, 2F, 2F. But we are actually going to override something on our panels. So I want a border on the right hand side of this panel, and I want a border on the left hand side of this panel. I don't want it to appear on both. So if I went into the border here and I did a right border, made it white with a width of 2, you can see that applies to both. I don't want it to be on both. I want it to be just on the right for this side and on the left for this side. So what we can do is I'll return this, I'll unset this to 0, and we'll make our right and left borders be white in color, and this is on the stat panel class. I'm going to leave the width as 0, and then on our stat panel we can do on the width here, say like 4 pixels for the right. Oh, sorry, that's slice. We don't need that. That was the wrong place to do that. I'm going to come down to border, and on the right we'll do 4 pixels. And on our skill description panel, under border, on the left, I'm going to do 4 pixels. And again, the color is determined here. So if I wanted to change the color of the border, I could do so in our style sheet here. But we're determining the size of the border actually on the visual element. So let's come back up here and we'll reset that back to white. And actually probably a better way would be to come up here and set them all to white and control the color of the border from here. So now you can see that it does change based on just this one thing that we can override. So if you want all of your borders to be the same color, just use the color element here and it will set the top, right, bottom and left to be that size. Okay, so we've got our panels, but they're all equal size, and obviously we need this middle one to be wider. We need it to be slightly bigger than these two. So with our stat panel, we want these to take up, say, 25% of the screen, with the remaining 50% given to this middle panel here. So with our stat panel, I'm going to come over to size, and we're going to say width, and we're going to set this to 25 and come into this little dash here, and we'll say %. And this won't work until you come up to grow and set that to 0. So we don't want them to grow over this size. So we're going to set the width and we're going to set the grow to 0, and they will now take up 25% of the size of our screen. If we want to change that, you know, we can do. We can say just take up, each of them takes up 10% of the screen, but we want it to be sort of 25. We may end up dropping that depending on how much room we need in the middle. Okay, so that's done, and we've now got this sort of center panel is just filling up the rest of the space. So you want to leave this width on auto and grow to 1, and it will just grow and automatically adjust its width to whatever space is left for it by these other panels. If we were to duplicate the skill tree section like a couple of times, you can see that our stat panel and our skill description don't change in size. They stay 25%, but our elements here, they will shrink to just match up the space that's left for them. But we don't need those two, so we're going to have our skill tree here. But what we are going to do is we're going to have different tiers inside. So again, back to our demo project, you can see here we've got the top row, middle row, and bottom row. And what that looks like in game is when we hit play, we have our skill tiers, which you'll remember from the first video, the programming side. So we've got our level 1 skills, and they're going to be in the top row. We have our level 2 skills and our level 3 skills. And you can have as many of these as you want. Obviously, if space runs out, you'd then want to put them in a scroll box, possibly in the middle. But for our example here, we're just going to have 3 levels of skills. So we've got our tier 1 skills, tier 2, and tier 3. So to actually get that set up in our main project here, as you can probably expect, we've got a main panel here with these 3 children. So what we want with our skill tree to do is we want it to have 3 children. We want it to have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So let's drag up visual elements. So 1, 2, 3. And if we go up to our skill tree, you can see this direction is already set to top to bottom on the flex. So we can see that it's organized them top to bottom. And again, if we wanted them to go left to right, we could do that there. So if you want your skill tree to go left to right, you could have tier 1 skills here, tier 2, and tier 3. I'm going to do them top to bottom though. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. And we'll name these to make sense. So skill row 1, skill row 2, skill row 3. So now we've got space for our tier 1 skills, tier 2, and tier 3. And again, you could duplicate these and have kind of as many rows as you want. If it ends up being too squished, you'd want to wrap these in a scroll view box. But that's outside of the scope of what we're doing. We're just doing our 3 here. And I've just hit Control S to save. Be sure to save often. This can be a little bit buggy, the UI builder, especially if you start changing the UXML file, which I'll show you that in a second. But if you make some changes in the UXML file, but don't save this prior, it can sometimes just mess up and become a bit buggy, so things won't appear as you expect. And actually, maybe this is a good time to show you the UXML file. So if I go back to the Unity project, we can actually open up this this UI skill tree, which is what we've been working on. If we double click it in Unity, obviously it opens up the UI builder window. So I'm just going to open up one of my scripts in my IDE just to get the solution open. Okay, so it's open up in Rider here. If I go to the UI folder, we can open up our skill tree UXML file. And you can see that what we're seeing in the builder is actually represented here in code. We've got our visual elements with our names that we just give them, so skill underscore row 1, 2, and 3. And what's really good about this is if we just drag this over to make some room, it might get a bit squished here. And then if I bring up the builder window, just going to have to get it overlapping to fit on the screen. So we've got our skill tree here, row 1, 2, and 3. If I duplicate this row and call this row 4, as soon as I hit save and go back over to Unity, you can see now that's made a 4th row, and it was instant. There was no recompile. There is some errors. I think that's just a bug with Unity. That's nothing to do with, that's nothing we've done. You can just clear them and it'll be fine. So you can actually make programmatic changes to the UI if you know XML. You can do that here. But this is another way to build UIs, and we will do this to save a bit of time later, because you can set one thing up in the UI builder just to get the formatting correct and you know what the actual code is to do what you want, and then you can just copy and paste it, change stuff in code. It's just a lot quicker and easier to do. Like I said, it updates instantly. Yeah, so we could rename any of these as well. So if we wanted to rename main panel to stat panel, we could do that there and it would update. I just wanted to show you guys that now. We will come back to this a little bit later, but it's actually really interesting that you can make, even as a programmer, you can make UI without needing the visual side of it. I just think that's quite cool. Okay, so we've got our window set up. Now we need to start putting some actual text in place here to, you know, actually hook into and display our stats. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, so now that we've got our UI looking like this, it's time to actually start putting some information in it. So we'll start with our stat panel here, and we're going to put our text in it. So as we know from the demo project and from the coding that we did, we're going to need our stats, and then we've got strength, dex, int, whiz, charisma, con, and then our abilities of double jump, dash, and teleport, and we've got an amount of skill points, and then we want like a little cheat button to give ourselves skill points if we need that. So to do that, we're going to come over here, and we're actually going to use a mix of using the UI builder, but then also writing them in that XML document that we just looked at. So I'm going to, at first, with our stat panel, I'm going to drag up a label, and I'm going to call this stat header. So we've got our stat header, and you can see the text here, it just says label. If we zoom in, you can see that that's really dark. And it's just a plain built-in font. So we might want to replace this with a nicer font. So let's go over to defont.com, and we'll pick a serif font under basic, sorry, sans serif, and we can use Bebas New, I like that one usually, or Cool Vetica, you know, like whatever it is for your project. I will use Bebas. You can see I've already downloaded it previously, so let's just find that. So once you've got your font and extracted it, I'm going to use the regular OTF, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go into our tutorial project, and in our assets folder, right-click, show in Explorer, and I'm just going to paste our font in here, and you can see the font comes in here. So what we need to do is we can right-click the font, come up to Create, go to Text, and choose Font Asset. So the UI Toolkit doesn't use Text Mesh Pro, it just uses this text here. So we'll need to make a font asset. And then in our UI builder, with our stat header selected, in the inspector, we're looking for this text section. And then we can choose Bebas, and then Bebas here as well. And you can see that that's updated our header label. And I'm actually going to do what we did earlier and extract this to extract the inlined styles. So I'm going to say header label and extract inline styles to new class. And then with our header label, we can set the color to white. We'll increase the size slightly as well to 40 pixels, and we'll center it as well in the middle of the box and kind of align it center. I don't want it to wrap. And for text overflow, we'll just let it clip for now. So this is our header label, and I'm going to set the text here to stat. And then underneath this, we can drag in another label to our stat panel. And I'm going to, again, set our font. So we can set our font to Bebas. You don't actually have to set it in font here, you just leave that as none. I'm not 100% sure why. If anyone knows, it'd be great to leave me in the to leave a comment below. But yeah, you can just plug in that font asset. For some reason, if you just choose the font, it doesn't actually do anything. It's this font asset that it needs to update the label. And again, I'm going to extract the inlined style. So I'm going to call this the stat label. Extract inlined styles to new class. And choose our stat label. And again, I'm going to set this to white. We want it to be centered and middle aligned. And we're going to just drag this up. And we're going to set the text for these through code anyway down the line, but just so we know what we are working with, let's go back to our label, and under text we'll just put strength 10, just so we know what that is. And then we're going to name this. So we're going to name this the strength, we'll call it stat label underscore strength. So now we have these two here. I'm going to save our UI builder sheet. We're going to save this UXML file, and I'm going to open this up in Rider. So again, we can go back to our UI script. So again, go over to your IDE, and we're going to open up the skill tree here. And we can see here that we've got our stats text, and it's got the name of stat header, and we've got our stat label underscore strength. So I know that we need the stats from our skill manager. So we've got strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and constitution, and we've got our abilities of double jump, dash, and teleport as well. So we need labels to represent all of these stats, and we need labels to show off our unlockable abilities, and we'll need a label for our skill points as well. So instead of doing this manually in the UI builder, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this line here at first. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 skills. So I'm going to have this copied 5 times to make for 6 labels. So in Rider, I can just press Control D. So there's 3, 6. So we've got strength. I'm just going to drag this to the side here. So we've got strength, dexterity, so dex 10, int 10, whiz 10, cha 10, and con 10. And here for our labels, the name, got stat label strength, we'll have stat label dexterity, and we'll do that for the rest of them as well. So they're all in place there. So we've got stats here, strength, dex, int, whiz, and charisma, and con. And we can see here that this is our header. So I'm just going to copy and paste that down here. So we've got stat header. So we've got that down here. I'm going to change this to ability header. Change the text here to ability. And then I'm going to copy stat label. And we've got double jump, dash, and teleport. So I'll say double jump, dash, locked. I want this to be in the order that they are in the script, just so it makes sense kind of in my head. So let's go back to our skill manager. So double jump, dash, and teleport. So double jump unlocked, dash locked, and teleport locked. For the name of this, I'm going to call this ability label. Double jump, ability label dash, ability label teleport. For class, I'm going to keep that as stat label, unless we want to style them differently down the line. Stat label is fine. And then for our skill points, again, I'm going to copy the header, but instead of calling this ability header, I'm just going to call this the skill points label. And here I'll say skill points 99. Now, if I save this file, this UXML file, and go back over to Unity, you can see they're all here now. And we've done that programmatically through code. That was a lot quicker, in my opinion, than dragging out a text, renaming it, going in, typing it out here. That was just so much quicker. And if we want these to be sort of centered within this panel, under stat panel here, in align, we can align our contents in the middle of the page. So if we come down to justify content, we can center it. So that's going to center all of the text within here. Now, if we hover over the header label, we might want to make these a little bit bigger just to make them stand out, that they are headers, so we can maybe increase the size. If you wanted to, we could give them a border as well, so maybe give them a white border, and we could just do like a pixel for top and bottom, so we know these sections are kind of distinct. If you wanted, you could do 4 pixels all around and then increase the radius of them, so you can make them a bit rounder if you wanted to. It just depends how you want to style your project, but I like this with the 4 pixel border top and bottom. And you can see how quick that was doing that through code as opposed to doing it in the UI builder. So let's hit save. See, this is what I mean about the bug. Sometimes it will kind of reset what you've just done, some of the changes if you mess with the XML file. So annoyingly, I'm going to do that again. So let's bring that back up to, I think it was like 53. Stat panel. Under stat panel, justify content, we did it in the middle with our header label. Again, let's save that. We did a white border. Something that I got into the habit of doing to avoid that bug is if I changed anything in their XML file, when I went back and it refreshed, I'd just make a single change. So I'd like change that from 5, save it, and then change it back to 4, save it, and then do what else I wanted to do. And usually that was fine, but just keep that in mind that when you hit save, depending on what you've done with this XML file, it may revert back. So do a change, hit save, and then do the rest of your changes. I don't know if it's a bug that's going to get fixed or if it's just a flaw of the system. Again, if you know anything about it, it'd be great if you'd let me know below. Okay, so we've got some stuff to be working with here. Before we start working on the middle and the side, Let's actually get the UI showing in game. So at the minute, we've just got this blue screen. If we hit play, there is no UI. So we hit play, no UI, there's nothing in the scene other than our camera. So let's start working on that, shall we? So let's just close this for now. We can just press the X and we're going to right click and create an empty, and we'll call this our UI manager. And to this, we can add a UI document component. So just add component UI document, that's here. We've got this error here. So to display a UI document, you need to assign a panel settings asset. If we click the radial button, we don't actually have one in our project, but it shows you how to create one here. So right click, create UI toolkit, panel settings asset. And we'll just call this panel settings. So you can see here, this has some basic settings, kind of similar to what you'd find if we brought in a UI canvas. So if we bring in a UI canvas, you can see we've got some stuff about how it's rendered, the target display, scaling, things like that. With this, you don't have that, so this panel settings kind of does a similar thing here. So we've got scale with screen size. So we've got like scale with screen size, constant pixel, constant physical size. So we need to drag that into our panel settings here. And then we want our source asset, which is the actual UI element we want to display. And we've got our skill tree here, so we can just drag that in, or again, select it from the radial button. If we choose the skill button, we've not built that yet, obviously, so it's this UI skill tree. So here is the UI, and you can see that if we hit play, that is now visible in game. We've got our strength, dex, int, with blah, blah, blah. So now let's actually make some strips to interact with our UI document. So the first thing I'm going to make is a class, which is the UI manager. So new C# script, UI manager, and I'm going to make another script which is going to be responsible for this specific panel here on the left hand side. So right click, C# script, and we'll call this the UI stat panel. Now let's open this up in our IDE. So UI manager. We'll zoom in here, and we've got our UI stat panel here. So let's start here in the UI manager class. So we'll go to UI manager. Now, this is going to need a reference to various things. So for example, it's going to need to know about our player skill manager, which doesn't actually exist in the scene yet. So let's make a right click, empty, and I'm just going to call this player. So your player skill manager, it might live on your actual player prefab. It might live just on a player manager script. It's going to live wherever it makes sense for your project. So if you've got multiple players, obviously it'd be better to live on the actual player. But for us and for this project, I'm just going to have this empty, which is representing our player. And to it, I'm going to add the player skill manager. So we can see that there. And again, just as a reference, just so you remember from the last episode, this is where we are defining our actual stats and where we can get reference to what our current stats is, and kind of, you know, all the stuff about modifying stats and unlocking skills, that's all in here. So we will need a reference to that. So I'm going to say private player skill manager, and we'll call this the player skill manager. and we can either serialize this and assign it in the inspector, or we can get it in the awake function just by finding an object of that type, which is how I'm going to do this. It's probably not the best way to do it, and again, it would completely depend on your project, like where this is. So if you only have one skill manager in the scene, you could either make it a singleton, or find it here, or serialize the field and assign it in the inspector. Again, this is more specific to your project of how you would go about assigning this. For this specific instance, because we know it's a simple scene, this isn't going to bog stuff down. I'm just going to do it this way. So player stat manager equals find object of type player stat manager. And we also want a reference to the UI document, which is which lives on the UI manager game objects in the scene. And actually, while we're here, we can add our UI manager script to this. It's on the same object as the UI document, so we can use get component to get that. So we can say private UI document, and this is using Unity engine.UI elements. So if we bring that in, you can see that's using the Unity engine.UI elements. And to this, I'm just going to call this underscore UI document. And for this one, we'll do get component, because we know that it's on the same component as the UI manager. So we'll say UI get component UI document. And I'm going to make some public getters for both of these. So I'm going to say public player skill manager, and we'll player skill manager, and we'll return the player skill manager, this private one here. And I'm going to do the same for the UI document. So public UI document, and that returns our underscore UI document. So now I'm going to go back to our UI stat panel class, and let's go back to our project actually and add the stat panel class to our UI manager game object. So UI stat panel, and then we'll go back to our script. So here we're going to want to get references to all the different labels that we have on our skill tree. So we know we've got a strength label, the dex label, int, wiz, charisma, and constitution. And we're also going to want labels, reference labels to these, the dash, double jump, and teleport. And we'll want a reference to this label as well, skill points, so we can update it. And we've got the names of these here as well. And you can see that I've done them in a very specific sort of naming convention, which will make this section a bit more simple. So let's get a reference to these labels. So we say private label, and again, this is the label in Unity engine.UI elements. And we'll say strength label. And we need these for all of the stats. So we can say dexterity label, and yeah, all the way through to constitution label. And I've got these all in one line. If you wanted, you could have lots of different references, but it makes sense to kind of group them together in this way. And we'll want the other labels as well in the ones that we've mentioned. So double jump, dash, and teleport, as well as our skill points. And then we can actually gather the label references through code. We don't need to sort of assign them in the inspector. So let's make another variable here, and this is going to be a reference to the UI manager called UI manager. And we know that the UI manager is on the same object as the UI stat panel. So in the awake function, let's just assign UI manager is equal to get component UI manager. And you can obviously check to make sure that's not null if you want to. So we can just say if UI manager is null, debug an error. And then in the start function, I'm just going to call a method which we will make in a second called gather label references, which is just going to be a private void, and it's going to gather label references. So in here, we're going to want to start finding the labels that match our different labels here. So we've got strength label, so we can say strength label is equal to, and the way that you get a reference to like a label or like a visual element within a UI document is you use a query function which is part of the UI document. So let's go back to stat panel. I'll show you what the syntax for this looks like. So I'm going to get our UI manager, which we've got here, and I'm going to access the UI document public getter that we've got here. And from that UI document, we're going to get the root visual element, which is a variable built into UI document, and it's just the very top level asset. It's the root visual element. It kind of, you know, says what it is. And then from that, we can use this Q query, and then in pointy brackets, we're looking for an element of type label, which has the name of our label. So we've got our stat label strength here. And this is a string, so we just need to put that in quotes. So that's going to search the UI document for a label with the name stat label underscore strength. And you just need to do that for all of these other labels, including the ability labels and the skill points label as well. And because we kept these sort of organized in terms of like our naming conventions, we can now, you know, duplicate this, and we can say dexterity label, and then just change this to dexterity. Now you'll remember in the first episode I disabled GitHub Copilot. With Copilot enabled, this would be as simple as pressing enter, and it'd just know that you wanted to then do the next one, and you could press tab and then it'd automatically fill in. Because we don't have Copilot, we've got to do this all manually, but that's fine. So I'm just going to go through and I'll do all of those now. Okay, so there's our label references gathered. So we've got strength, dex, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, constitution. We've got all of our references here. We've got our ability labels, double jump, dash, teleport, and our skill points label. Now underneath this gather label references, I'm going to make a new function called populate label text. And we'll come down here, and this again will be a private void populate label text. And here, this is where it became important that we had a reference to the player skill manager, but also had like a public way of accessing it. So if we go to our UI manager, our UI stat panel, we can say strength label is equal to str dash, and then plus, and then UI manager dot player skill manager dot strength to string. And sorry, that should be strength label dot text is equal to string. Equal to this string. So we've got strength and then our strength score. And again, we have to do that for all of our other labels. And I'm going to do my skill points one next, because that's just as simple as the other ones. So we get our skill points to string, and the ability ones are going to be slightly different. So here, what we want to do is we want to say double jump label is equal, dot text is equal to double jump colon space, and then we're going to check whether it's unlocked or not. So UI manager dot player skill manager dot double jump. If double jump is true, then we know it's unlocked. So we use the question mark, we say unlocked, and then else locked. And we have to wrap this in brackets. So double jump label.text equals double jump with a space, and then we're just checking here, is double jump unlocked, which is what this question mark is like, is it true? And if it is, we do this first thing, so unlocked. If it's not, we do locked. So this is just a quick way of basically saying, is double jump unlocked? If that's true, that says what we put, else we say this. And we do the exact same thing for the other two abilities as well. Okay, and if you remember in the first episode, on our player skill manager, we did this Unity action on skill points changed. In our stat panel here, we can, in the start function, get a reference to our skill manager. So UI manager dot player skill manager on skill points changed, and then we can do plus equals, and we can make the populate label text respond. Get fired, sorry, when this action is called. Okay, so now that should largely be working. Let's just go back over to Unity and see where we are at. So our skill manager here, we are setting them just directly to 10 here. But we've already typed in 10 there, so they're not actually going to, if we just hit play, nothing's going to change. We won't be able to see anything apart from skill points will change because we're setting skill points to 10 as well. I think the easiest way to do it is if we go back to our skill tree UXML, I'm just going to change this to 0, 0, just so that's like a nice default value. And we'll set skill points to 0, 0 as well. So if we save this UXML file, we can see that immediately updates here. And if we hit play, if everything's gone according to plan, these should change to what our player skill manager is showing. And actually, I don't think it will, but we'll fix that in a second if it doesn't. So we'll hit play. Okay, no, it did. That's good. Yes, because I thought it wasn't going to work because in stat panel we're doing populate label text, but we're not actually firing this at the start of the game, but we're calling it manually. So yeah, that's fine. So you can see there that there was no errors and it got all of our labels okay in gather label references, and then in populate label text it accessed the skill manager and it updated the strength and skill points and stuff accordingly. So if we hit play, you can see that working again. So skill points go to 10 and strength, dex, int, with charisma, constitution, they go to 10. So now we've got our stats displaying as they're built into our player skill manager. So the next thing really is to actually get some skills displaying in the middle of the screen. And then after that, we can then do the skill description because we need some skills to click on to generate the skill description.